Basebuilding, or Colonization, or Trailblazers, as Frontier has decided to name this upcoming release, is coming to Elite Dangerous on February 26. We know actually quite little about what will be going on with that release. In fact, the Frontier Unlocked session that is supposed to discuss it is actually planned to happen on the very same day of release, on February 26th. And as of time of speaking, it doesn't look like creators are going to get any kind of insider access to this update. So we're all left wondering and scratching our head, besides the very early release information that was provided in the previous Frontier Unlocked. So we have a few questions that I think are worth asking, and the reality is nobody has the answers right now, but I hope our friends over in the UK are wondering along some of the similar things because they are important and they matter. The first question is, from where will colonization be possible? I think to this day, Frontier has mentioned that expansion is meant to start from the bubble, and then they will see. But what is the bubble? Are the Pleiades part of a bubble? Is it just places inside some arbitrary definition that is covered by power play today? Is Colonia its own bubble? Does it count as a bubble? Like, it would be good to get a little bit more clarification as to like from where will we be able to expand, and what will the range be? Like the range that was presented in the earlier session was a meager 10 light years, which I think my hunch is, again, our British friends got the memo in terms of the reaction of community that 10 light years was abysmally low and they needed to increase it at least to a degree. Whether they move it all the way up to 100 or whether they move it to 11, who knows? It would be good to get some indication of that, and it'll be interesting to see like where we land in terms of like calibration of that, or where they leave it at 10, which they might as well. Then one thing I am personally particularly interested in is how will commissioning the beacons, the colonization beacons for systems work? Is it actually first come, first serve? Are we going to have to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning on a Thursday of a release to rush and try and get our beacon for the system we love and dream that's in high interest and high demand? I know one particular system that pretty much the entire Anti-Xeno initiative is going to be rushing towards, but it might be too far for initial colonization, and we might not even be able to colonize from the Pleiades, which it's around. So, like, chances are it may not even be a thing. But that's kind of the thing. And maybe I'm one of the many who was recently burned by the paper launch of the NVIDIA cards and catastrophically failed at getting a card on launch. And I'm like, are we gonna have to like pay scalpers for like colonization beacons to kind of like get our hands on systems who kind of create bots to kind of like race on release and get their beacons out? Or I mean, first come, first serve for assets that are exclusive and galaxy wise is not a good system. Like, there are other systems, there are auctions, there are lotteries, there are ways to provide people for the opportunity to have a fair chance at their claim of a system beacon without relying on this absolutely frustrating mechanism of first come, first serve, which breeds bad behaviors. And honestly, I would really not want to see it in the game. But again, it is the easiest to implement. So again, if the goal is to have as little work as possible to sort that out, I can understand that being what they do. I just wouldn't particularly like it. And then what are the benefits of colonization? Like, there's been a lot of talk about bringing materials and commodities to build out spaceports that are built over time as a system architect. But besides map painting, as in putting another name on a system where it says, in addition to being the commander who first scanned, first mapped, first footfault, now you're also the system architect. Oh, great, awesome. Like, congratulations, handshake, pat on the back. But besides the title, if you want, of being the system architect of a particular system and the ability to like sort of finish the construction of a starport there, like, what does being the system architect actually confer in terms of benefits? Like, why would you do this besides actually constructing infrastructure and painting the map? That's a question I think will be very interesting to explore. A question which is always present in this game is also, what is the grind level associated with this? Like, what is the materials or commodities or credits that are going to be required to do this? I think they mentioned something being sort of significantly less expensive than fleet carriers, which I guess is good. Um, but what is significantly less? And besides credits, how many commodities will actually be required to build starports? Is it something one person can do in a day, or is it something that requires a 500-person squadron a whole month to assemble? I think that's something I would love to personally understand better. And last, but maybe most importantly, is what is the gameplay loop associated with base building and colonization? As in, do we need to maintain these ports? Will they come under attack? Um, will they allow us to convert materials in ways that we wouldn't be able to do at materials traders? Like, what kind of novel gameplay loop is being associated with colonization? I mean, every new system in the game provides an amazing opportunity to add to the game, not just in terms of assets and eye candy and map painting opportunities, but also in terms of actual gameplay loops. And I think it would be a significantly missed opportunity if this release didn't come with meaningful additions to the gameplay loop of Elite Dangerous, be it in terms of additional ways to trade, additional ways to fight, or additional ways to explore and build. So those are some of the key questions I personally have, but I would love to hear your own questions and your comments below and what else you feel we should know from our British friends, either in the release Frontier Unlocked on the 26th, or if they decide to make any kind of communication or announcement, possibly even before. As a reminder, if you enjoy these videos, please take a moment to click like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell, as that will mean that you don't miss any of these news and videos. And it's also a great way to show your support, which I thoroughly appreciate. So thank you. Now moving on to elsewhere in the galaxy, if we can move on to elsewhere in the galaxy. There's a few more broader general news. The Finance Friday event of the Anti-Casino Initiative has been a resounding success. I didn't check the latest numbers, but last I saw, there were several hundreds, about 500 or 600 people who registered and showed up for the event. The smaller instances made it far more practical than our mega blockade, if somewhat more epic, definitely more bug-free and enjoyable for all. Most people who I heard attended walked away with a pretty good chunk of change and having had a pretty cool experience. So I spoke with Siren, and he's aiming to make these events fortnightly, so every other week, if we manage. But again, a lot will depend on time we have available and our ability to coordinate. So stay tuned for more information about that. There's also an exploration community goal active right now for commanders to turn in their exploration data specifically regarding high metal content and a few other type categories of worlds. The reward is a V1 scanner, planetary scanner, which is, on one hand, it's not that exciting because it's a module you can already purchase at a tech broker just for credits. It's generally nicer if these community goals are used to introduce some degree of additional variation in regards to pre-engineered and other available modules. But on the flip side, I do think that using existing modules is better than giving people access to one-of-a-kind or one-time only modules, like, for example, the 64-ton cargo rack, or the extremely elusive double-engineered point defense utility. By the way, if you have one of those, get in touch with me because I have a lot of questions about how that one works. It's extremely rare. I don't know anybody who actually has one of those. So I'm very curious. If you have one, reach out. I'd love to chat. But besides that, the idea of making one-time modules that are only available to a subset of people through community goal achievement tiers creates this fear of missing out and this kind of like bad dynamic in the game, in my experience. Personally, I feel the best way to do this is early access, like they did, for example, with the Sears heatsinks, where the community goal that introduced them basically made them available to commanders a few weeks early. And after a while that people had them, they became generally available, so everybody could buy them for materials at at technology brokers. Personally, I think that's the most balanced and most fair view, and people who are really excited about a module can go for it and get it early and have it for a few additional weeks. Everybody else who didn't make it or didn't have time to play that week because real life or God knows what else will have a chance to get the module a few weeks later, and it's not the end of the world. And it's not, you don't have that bad feeling in your mouth saying are being cut off because they don't have 12 hours a day to play. So, but again, personal suggestion on things that have worked well versus not so much. There's also talks about Distant Worlds 3. As a reminder, Distant World and Distant World 2 were some pretty amazing expeditions of a large community exploring out in the black, which also came with so-called distant ganks initiatives to disrupt them, which now in the era and world of fleet carriers, I think is a lot less meaningful and a lot less interesting, if you want, for those who like that type of gameplay. So I think it will be less of an issue, but we'll see. Either way, there's talks about that too. Anyhow, stay tuned, as that is something that is currently being debated. In this era of peace, after the Fargoid War, there's a major risk of humanity going soft. So we, as the Xenostrike Force and Anti-Xeno Initiative, will continue to train the next generation of pilots in the Pleiades Nebula, which traditionally has always been and remains boot camp for people approaching anti-Xeno combat for the first time, and in the California Nebula, which is the only place that currently hosts anti-Xeno combat zones, which are still active. So if you're looking to get involved and prepare for whatever the world may come, whatever in the galaxy may come, and my hunch is we have not seen the last of the Titans and certainly have not seen the last of the Fargoids, you're welcome to join us and continue to train with us to be ready when the time comes. And finally, I'm working to convince my partner in crime, Barefoot, to start work on the next music album on a number of tracks. So we started having a few ideas, and some of them are more advanced than others. Some of them are more thought through, but I think we have some pretty cool stories to tell from the last 6 months of history in the game, which has been as rich as possibly it has ever been. So stay tuned, pun intended, and help me drop a line in the comments below to convince Commander Barefoot to join me in developing the next music album on anti-Xeno combat. And glory to mankind. Commander Mechan, over and out.